Most people set up credentials wrong in n8n and it can expose your API key. In this guide, I share every single authentication type available in n8n in simple terms and insider tips. Along with that, I show you how to keep your workflows usable and secure. By the end of this video, you know how to safely set up custom credentials. Here's exactly how it works. Let's dive in. So, as said by n8n themselves, credentials are private pieces of information issued by apps and services to authenticate you as a user and allow you to connect and share information within the app or service and the n8n node, which is in most cases the HTTP request. And you can access the credentials UI by going to your n8n website, then go to personal. If you go to personal, just click on credentials and you would find your credentials here. And in n8n there are two types of credentials. There are the predefined credential type, which if you go here you can find them here, and these are typically provided by n8n themselves, so which means it is natively supported by n8n. And the second credential type is the generic credential type. This credential type is free custom, and the case where you would be using this is if the credential, the predefined credential type you would like to use, is not available or provided by n8n for the software that you'd like to make an API call to. So if it's not supported, all you have to do is go to generic and create your own custom one, which I would be showing you later in this video how to do that step by step and in a secure and private manner. So now that you know the key differences between the predefined credential type and the generic credential type, we'll be going in depth more into the generic credential type, because generic credential type has different authentication types that we can go into how to explain it for you in simple terms so that you can understand it, the logic behind it, and also examples of how to set it up in a private and secure manner. Starting with the first one, which is the basic auth. So if you go to generic, we click on basic. We can find it here, and let's create a new one. So how I want you to think of the basic auth is that it takes your username and password, puts it together, encodes it into base64, and uses that authentication in your HTTP request. But whenever using a basic auth, make sure it is a HTTPS request for security reasons. Think of the basic auth like this in simple terms. Think of a locked door that needs a key. Your username is the label on the key and your password is the secret part. You send them together as the secret code, which is a base64, and the server basically checks, does this key match my locks or one of my locks? If yes, basically it means you're in. That is basically how it works. Let me quickly show you an example of how to set it up. So you have a username here, which you can copy, but just paste it here. And then you have a password, which you can copy here. Just paste that here, and also name it into an identifiable name that you can quickly remember. So let's put basic, or let's just say captcha, and just save it. Up next, we have the bearer auth. So I want you to think of the bearer authentication as it's an access token, for example. It's an access token sent in the authorization header. The server basically validates the token and grants access. Like no username and password is sent in each request, for example, with the basic auth, and it's commonly used in OAuth 2 APIs. And a simple explanation for you to understand would be like, imagine it's like a magic token that proves you already have permission. So instead of showing your username / password every time, you just have to flash the token and the server looks at the token and says, yep, you're allowed. And a quick way to set it up could just be, let's say this is your token, you copy it. All you have to do is come here. So the way that you can identify a bearer authentication token is that at the end of the token it starts with bearer. So if it has that, it basically means it's a bearer authentication token, and all you have to do is just copy the token itself. You don't need to copy the bearer because n8n fills that out for you. Once you do that, just click on save. And if you might be confused about what the bearer authentication is, if you've made a request using the bearer authentication before, you might see the instructions in the API saying, okay, put this in the header, then in the value, put bearer, then you put your token here basically. What this does is that it just goes ahead and just sends this out of you having to do this all the time. And as you can see, your API is safe and secure. It's not visible, so whenever you're gonna, let's say for example, download this workflow, your API will not be included, as that is saved on your n8n account, not the workflow itself. Up next, we have the custom auth, which you can do by going here. In technical terms, basically the custom authentication allows you to define your own authentication mechanism. You can send credentials through headers, query parameters, or request body in any format required by the API. And in simple terms, some does have funny locks, as you may know, so you don't use a key or a token. Custom auth basically just lets you create your own secret message so that the server will recognize you. This is not widely used, to be honest, but if you, let's say, create your own API where you would like to implement this is basically how that works. And a way for you to set it up is basically by just going over here, just get this, set it up here, just set. This would be your secret key region, simple as that. That is your beer. Wait on sec, sorry. That is basically your custom auth. Up next, we have, I believe, which is the digest auth. The digest auth is similar to the basic auth, but it's a more secure type of an authentication because the server sends a nonce, which is a random string. The client combines it with a username and the password to create a hash, basically. So it combines three different things. So the server sends a nonce, which is like a random string, and it combines it with the username and the password to create a hash. The hash is then sent to the server, which verifies it, so the actual password is never transmitted. And in simple terms, just think of the digest auth as like a magic puzzle block. You never give the server your real password. Instead, the server sends a puzzle, you solve it using your password, and then the server checks if the puzzle has been solved correctly. If yes, you are allowed in. And the way to set it up is exactly the same as you would set up a basic auth. So you get your username, paste it here, and just get your password and save it here. Just make sure it's saved. So unlike the basic auth, you don't need to always use the HTTPS when making requests using this authentication type. You can use a HTTP request, but it's always recommended to always use a HTTPS request. We have what we call, I believe, the header auth. So the header auth is kind of similar. It's not completely similar to the bearer authentication, but the way you set it up is similar. So in technical terms, basically, the header authentication sends one or more custom headers with each request, and the API checks these headers to validate the client identity. And in simple terms, just think of the header auth like carrying an ID card in your hand every time you enter, and the ID card has your secret key. Every request shows the card, and the server checks if the key is valid. So that is basically how that works in simple terms. And for you to set it up, all you have to do is, let's get this example here. Let's paste one here and paste this one here. So that is basically it, and just save it. And if you were to do this, you would have to first click on the header, put your value here, and get the key to as well, which is this one, and just paste it here. That is how we would normally do it, but for a more secure manner, so that your keys are not exposed when you download this JSON workflow. For example, if you want to share it, you can use this generic authentication and choose the header auth. I would always recommend this rather than do this. So after that, we have the OAuth 1. So OAuth 1, in technical terms, just think of it like, okay, OAuth uses a consumer key secret and access token secret to sign requests cryptographically, and the signature ensures that the request is valid without sending any passwords in between the seller requests. And it's widely used in APIs like Twitter, stuff like that. And in simple terms, just think of OAuth 1 like sending a signed letter. So instead of giving your password away, you basically have a special pen and stamp that you sign the letter and send it over across to the server, and then the server basically checks the signature. if the signature is correct, access is granted and you can do whatever the request that you wanted to do. And the way to set it up is that you first need an authorization URL, you need an access token URL, consumer key, secret key, a request token URL. As you can see, this isn't widely used, but if you were to use it most of the time, you would know how to set it up. After the OAuth 1, we have OAuth 2, which in technical terms, OAuth 2 uses a client ID and secrets to request the access token from the authorization server. The token is then sent in the authorization header for the API request and often supports token refresh to avoid re-authentication. And in simple terms, just think of it like getting a VIP pass. First, you show your ID, which is the client ID or the secret, to get a temporary pass, which is the access token, and then you can use the VIP pass to go in and out without showing your ID every single time. And this is also the same as of the OAuth 2, which to set it up, you can see it's quite detailed, and in most cases it's not widely used. And if you were to use this, it's more likely that you built the API yourself, you would like to use this yourself. So that is how the OAuth 2 works. The last and final one is the query authentication. This is very common. So in technical terms, this query authentication basically sends the credentials, query parameters in the HTTP request URL, and the server validates the key value pair in the URL to allow access. And in simple terms, just think of the query of like writing a secret code to on your request letter, and then the server reads the code from the URL and decides if you are allowed in. And you've probably used a query auth if you're watching this video. So just think of it like this. So normally how you would set it up, let's say there's a random link here, and then at the end of the link there would be this, and then there will be this is equals to API. So it will be like this at the end of the link. And if you wouldn't like to set it up like this, another option that you could choose to do is by going to send query parameter, send in the value here, and send in the value here, putting the key of the value here too as well. So this is another way that you could set it up, but both of these ways are a bit insecure because, as I've said, if you were to download this n8n workflow and send it to somebody, if you haven't removed your values, which are your primary keys, they would have access to your keys, so which is not secure. And a more secure way of doing the query authentication is by choosing the generic authentication type query auth and creating your own credential. You should put the value here, which is your private access token, just paste it here, and then put the API underscore key here as the name. The name is basically the key. You can find that in the specific API recommendations that the API you are going to use, so you can find that there. So once you set it up here, just click on save, and that is a more robust and secure manner of setting this up. There's some best practices I would 100% recommend. So first of all, always use HTTPS to protect your credentials. So I might have said HTTPS a lot. What is HTTPS? So this HTTPS, just think of, you can see this link, for example, here is HTTP. All you have to do is HTTPS at the end. It basically turns it into HTTPS request. So this is not HTTPS, this is HTTPS. So always make sure that you are sending your request in HTTPS to protect your credential. After that, prefer OAuth or bearer tokens over the basic auth when possible. I would even recommend using the basic auth in the first place. If you have to use the basic auth, use the digest auth. The third one is also never hard code credentials into your workflows. Always use the n8n credentials. As I've told you, if you were to download your n8n workflow, your secret tokens, your API keys would get exposed, and if you were to send it to somebody, they would have access to your API keys and you can use that. So always use the n8n credential. The fourth one is test credentials before running the workflow. So always test the node, the HTTP node. Make sure that everybody does this, but it's just a reminder to always test it out and make sure it works with either the predefined or the generic credential types that you've set up. The fifth one is always keep credentials scoped only what you need. So for the API keys, let's say for the platforms that allow you to select your scope, let's say in their platform, before you generate your API key, always select the scopes that you need in case, let's say, the API key gets exposed, which should never happen if you have this n8n credential, or should I say the likeliness of that happening is almost 0%. So always select the scope if they give you an option to do that. The last and final one is avoid sharing credentials across multiple environments carelessly. So let me give you a quick example. Let's say you use OpenAI n8n, you use it on make.com, and you also use it on Zapier. n8n gives you an access token. What I would recommend, and what this means, is that always create 3 separate access tokens for each platform. So you'll have one for n8n, one for Zapier, and for make.com. So if, let's say, the breach on which the likeliness of that happening is 0, but just to be safe and secure, or let's say in one of your workflows you mistakenly didn't use the generic or the predefined authentication, you just put it directly into the HTTP node and you downloaded the workflow, which means if you were going to share it, somebody would have access to your access tokens, which means that they would just have access to your n8n access token, and they would have access to your make.com access token and your Zapier access token, which means it saves you a lot of headache, because you do not have to go across all your workflows or all your automations in n8n and Zapier and have to update them to the newer one, basically. So that is the whole point of the last tip. Now you can safely set up credentials in n8n without ever exposing your API keys. Your workflows are secure, reusable, and fully ready to connect to any service, giving you confidence and peace of mind in every automation. If you want to take this further, join the Builders Lab community, which is the first link in the description below, and you get access to 15 plus ready-to-use workflows, live calls with other automation builders and myself, and a space to ask questions and learn from real-world implementations of others. And if you want a custom solution built for your business, you can make an inquiry with my agency, which is the Fixion AI, which is the second link in the description below. Now go set up your secure credentials, join the community, and start building automations that actually work.